What are the latest tight end half-point PPR rankings for fantasy football and who's rising and who's falling? It's time for another stock watch as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Vinnie Iyer. And when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL and fantasy football for sportingnews.com. We're gathering the rankings by position there for you, whether you're playing half-point PPR, full, or your standard leagues. We've got you covered there as you're looking to dominate your drafts for 2023. And we will get to the tight ends here today. We look at the quarterbacks, running backs, and wide receivers here on Locked On Fantasy Football. So if you missed any of those, check it out. Subscribe and follow for free wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. Locked On Fantasy Football is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day. So we've looked at the other positions. Time to look at tight ends, a little bit different. We know that we're not looking as deep, but we still want to consider a lot of options here beyond the first tier. So we'll break things down for you well into the 20s and what you should look at this position, where you can mine for sleepers later, and why certain players are ranked in certain spots. And if anyone's overrated or underrated, we'll catch it along the way. So let's dive right in. The first guy on the list, no surprise, Travis Kelce, no qualms about that. He is a dominant force, not just at tight end. He gives you such an advantage across positions, going as a big-time first-round pick still in fantasy. Really, you can go with him in standard, but half-point full PPR looks awesome. He's still the go-to guy, and even more so. They moved on from Juju Smith-Schuster in Kansas City, so now they're figuring things out with Kadarius Toney. He's already banged up. He's going to dominate targets. Kelce still has at least one more big season left in him. Very durable. We know also one of the better assets to stay on the field. Mark Andrews still in that sweet spot at number 2, opening up the offense a little bit with Todd Monken in Baltimore, but Andrews is still going to be a significant part here, even with the wide receiver additions of Odell Beckham Jr. and Nelson Aguilar and Zay Flowers in the draft. Andrews is still going to be the go-to guy in key spots all the way through the red zone for Lamar Jackson. Now, a guy joining them in the elite tier might surprise some folks, but he's worthy of the spot. It's T.J. Hockenson. Big year when he transitioned from the Lions to the Vikings in the NFC North. Now he's the clear number 2 target on his team. We like to see that. You know, Kelce is a option A, so is Andrews on their team. Hockenson is right up there behind an elite number 1 wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. They lose Adam Thielen, didn't bring him back. It's a drop-off to the rookie Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne. Hockenson has flashed before. He wasn't deployed as well as he could have been, I thought, in Detroit. Now in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, Kirk Cousins, and the loss of Thielen here, a lot of key vacated targets, especially in the red zone and working the middle of the field. So Hockenson definitely belongs there. Again, we're looking for that tight end to be as high in the pecking order as possible. So again, Kelce and Andrews are basically the top options. Hockenson is a strong second option. So we go from Kelce, Andrews, and Hockenson there in a tier by themselves to the next one and the next group of tight end ones. You have George Kittle. Makes a lot of sense. He's coming off a big year with whoever's a quarterback. He was helped by Brock Purdy for sure as a younger quarterback. So Kittle is there with the Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. A little bit drops there, but I think you have to look at between Christian McCaffrey, Ayuk, Samuel. Kittle still gets his in this offense, even though it's a little bit limited in terms of the pass heaviness in San Francisco. He's still up there. He belongs in the spot. I think you can make an argument, however, he belongs behind this next guy, Kyle Pitts, because you have now Drake London and Kyle Pitts. So those are the main guys for Desmond Ridder. Maybe that's a question mark here, but the 49ers have their own question mark at quarterback. We know if it's Purdy, you'd feel better with Kittle at number 4, but Pitts, I think, is in for a big year. Again, Ritter is going to trust him quite a bit. Drake London, these young targets are really going to come through as first-round pedigreed players. Dallas Goedert comes in to round out the top half of tight end ones. Maybe a little higher on the list. He has some durability issues. We know that from last year. Missed some time. He's still the clear third target behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. So again, Goddard may be a little bit too aggressively ranked here in the top 6. He's solid, but I don't think the ceiling is all that high for him, just capped by the nature of this Eagles offense where they have other tight ends. They don't really use him much in the red zone. He's more of a guy that can rack up yardage in key times when Brown and Smith are kind of contained. So I'm going to look at there a little bit buyer beware. But if I had to go, I think I really like this Hockenson at number 3 here in this part of the rankings. Now let's look at the rest here. When we examine that, we will do that in our next couple segments here in Locked On Fantasy Football. Some players that I like behind Goddard in that next grouping that we'll discuss in our next segment here. Then we'll look deeper, go into the tight end 2s that could have value as tight end 1s. We'll take care of all that here on the show. Before we do that, I've got to tell you that our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football, that's us right here, to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long, whether you're prepping for a draft or scouting the waiver wire. Every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So draft prep underway for the upcoming season. Let's see our picks here for this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. When the top tier of quarterbacks is off the board in fantasy football drafts in 2023, there's another line of luxury passers and runners who are guaranteed to fit your starting lineups every week. The Bengals' Joe Burrow remains a classic pick in the top 6 QB1s with his prolific reliability in an offense with great weapons he knows so well. Burrow will get it done again, humming along to big numbers in Cincinnati. Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly as you get air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, you're going to be good. eBay Motors has it for you, and they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car because every eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what you can get and need for your vehicle the first time. So go for it, switch gears, crank the AC up, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up because you know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All right, it is time to continue the show here on Locked On Fantasy Football, and we'll look at the second half of tight end ones. These are the top 12 here. We're looking at the size of most leagues here in redraft. Darren Waller, this is a guy that I think we're going to watch carefully to rebound. I mean, the Giants didn't upgrade wide receiver all that much. Paris Campbell was their notable veteran addition here. They do have Isaiah Hodgins, hoping to have a better role with this team. But it's a mixed bag, right, of other receivers, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, all these guys. Darren Waller, they got him for a reason to have that security blanket tight end. They were not totally happy with Daniel Bellinger. He had the injury as well with the eye. So Darren Waller, again, big rebound situation here. Keep in mind, Mike Kafka comes from Kansas City, the offensive coordinator. They use the tight end well there. You had Brian Dable come from Buffalo. They use Dawson Knox. So you'll see a hybrid of his usage here for Daniel Jones. And Jones, I figure, is going to look at Waller quite a bit and into the red zone as well. So really like that to bump up here. A former Giant, Evan Ingram, I would downgrade a little bit. You have to look at him a little bit too high for me at number 8. Just too many mouths to feed, right? Calvin Ridley joins the fray. He's a good red zone receiver and inside receiver. You add that to Christian Kirk and Zay Jones, and Ingram is going to be good in reality, and that's why they brought him back. But I think it's going to be a little bit volatile up and down here week to week in fantasy. So I might downgrade Ingram a little bit just because of the situation. Pat Freiermuth, look, the Steelers should also have a lot of people to throw to, but still have young quarterback and Kenny Pickett. Freiermuth is pretty consistent. So Ingram volatile, Freiermuth consistent. I might go in the consistent route here. David Njoku, I think you have to be careful of as well because, again, it's Deshaun Watson, and it changes the game a little bit. Njoku had a big year last year, but you still have some options at tight end. They expanded their repertoire at wide receiver with Elijah Moore, so you got to slide him back in that pecking order for sure. So Ingram and Njoku pull away from. Dalton Schultz, I think, is maybe being undervalued here in his transition from Dallas to Houston. Still a very capable tight end that you look at and that really can rack up the numbers. They have a lot of vacated targets in most of the league. It's not going to get done with just Nico Collins and John Mechie and Robert Woods. They're going to need a lot from the tight end, and this is a key offense, 49ers-like offense that Kittle thrives in with C.J. Stroud. So I like Schultz, bump him up a few notches here. So Ingram and Njoku down a little bit. Schultz, I would maybe push behind Waller, and then Freiermuth after that. And this guy, the next guy, I think this is a trap waiting to happen, is Greg Dulcich at number 12. This was a guy that was valued a little bit more by the old coaching staff, but interesting that they traded for Adam Troutman, the former Saint there with Sean Payton and Joe Lombardi. So far, the camp hasn't been going that direction. You also have Tim Patrick back at wide receiver. He added Marvin Mims in the draft. Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton. I think Greg Dulcich, I know we're excited about his athleticism, but he has to worry about Albert O, some competition there, new offense. So I would slide him way down here. I just don't trust Dulcich to be a guy that we're going to look at as an every week starter. A little bit aggressive with his ranking, maybe just with the buzz and the athleticism there for sure. All right, our final segment, we will cover the tight ends that are 13 through 18, go a little bit deeper, rapid fire on the ones that are a little bit off the board here for you that maybe need to be more on the board. We'll find some deep sleepers that you can target. Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day airs. Tomorrow on the show, we'll catch you up on some news and notes across the league in training camp, and we'll go rapid fire with that to get to all the teams, see what's going on, and really catch you up if there's anything we need to know from fantasy football, some other stock watch related items here. So along the way, if we learn something more about quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end after we've done our rankings updates, we'll give you that on the show. So time for news and notes. We're overdue for that, so we'll give that to you to close the week on Friday. All right, it is time to close the show and our little mini series on the rankings updates here at the start of training camp across positions for half point PPR and fantasy football. Tight end, we continue. This is a guy that I'm going to point the arrow up, Chig Okonkwo. I know a little bit of slide with the acquisition of DeAndre Hopkins, but I think Hopkins eats more into Treylon Burks and Nick Westbrook-Akine. Okonkwo is still going to be a key part of what they do. He's their most athletic target that they've had. Really, they had Jonas Smith, but I think I go back to Delaney Walker being a key fantasy football asset with Marcus Mariota. I think Okonkwo is going to be pretty key here. Flashed in very limited time last year. Now his tight end completely to himself here. So Okonkwo, I'm going to point up. Cole Kmet, the arrow has to continue to go down here. Just don't trust him with the DJ Moore in the mix, more guys to throw to. So Kmet goes down a little bit. Tyler Higbee kind of holds steady. I'm not too interested in him, but he's underrated when you look at the numbers overall. They don't have a lot to throw to behind Cooper Kupp with the Rams. Gerald Everett, you got to slide down as well. You got Quentin Johnston there with the Chargers, so that's going to be a hard situation. Juwan Johnson, not a bad spot here. There's not a lot at receiver, maybe a little bit of an arrow up there behind Chris Olave on the Saints with Derek Carr, so something to look at there. Mike Gesicki, I would fade hard, along with Hunter Henry is ranked all the way down at 27. Gesicki at this spot 18. I would maybe flip them a little bit. I think Henry is a little bit better of a guy that you look at. Gesicki, I just can't with his tight end split there. Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, interestingly enough, are 19 and 21. So that's not good for fantasy, right? When they're sharing that position, they might treat Kincaid more as a wide receiver, but they also have some receiving options there. Khalil Shakir behind Steph Diggs and a little bit of Gabe Davis. So something to look at there. Irv Smith, maybe not getting enough love. He's playing a key spot for the Bengals that Joe Burrow could target at tight end. He's the better receiver that they've had since C.J. Uzomah's there, flashing a little bit of numbers. Irv Smith can be that type of tight end, a good red zone guy as well. So maybe bump up for him and go away from this Kincaid, Knox, Gesicki, Henry split that you're looking at. Trey McBride, it's hard to go with him yet. I mean, they might open things up a little bit. They lost Hopkins and they need those targets. You look at Hayden Hurst. I think there's too many other guys that you can look at with the Panthers to go in that direction. Taysom Hill, not interested because his hybrid role is going to be less with Derek Carr in there. Then we look at some rookies beyond that. Sam Laporta getting some buzz with the Lions, but he's well buried at 25. Laporta, however, pointing upward. They need some help with Jameson Williams suspended early. He's a guy that can play well off. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown and went to Iowa, so it could be a more direct replacement with athleticism for TJ Hockenson. Noah Fant, it's hard to trust that the Seahawks are likely going to go away from the 12 personnel. They got other people in there like Colby Parkinson and Will Dissly, so I think you'll see more 11 with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. The one guy that should be getting more attention is Michael Mayer. You look at this Raiders situation, there's just Austin Hooper, there's just O.J. Howard. When you look at Foster Moreau and Darren Waller, they put up some really good tight end numbers in that Josh McDaniels offense last year. It's McDaniels. He knows the value of a good tight end that can make a difference. Jimmy Garoppolo is also good at throwing to George Kittle. So all the things line up here for Michael Mayer, just about winning and getting that opportunity. I mean, Hooper and Howard are veteran guys that have bounced around a little bit, had their best days elsewhere. So something to look at there for sure. So digging a little deeper, I would say when you look at Kincaid and Laporta and Mayer and some of these other guys that are rookies, I really like Laporta and Mayer maybe getting not enough love here as we go forward. And again, I like Hockenson high, Waller's a sleeper, and these guys. Rookies, you just have to temper expectations. The younger tight ends in general, see what their role can be and figure that out. I'm not too interested in like tight end split committees and passing games that already have receiving depth there. So something to look at and consider at go for some upside later at tight end. If you can't get one of those bona fide starters, go after somebody that is in a good spot to shoot up here with their production. All right, there you have a look at the tight ends and the latest rankings updates that you need to know here for Half Point PPR Fantasy Football in 2023. Thanks again for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Again, we will close with news and notes tomorrow for Locked On Fantasy Football. This has been Vinnie Iyer. Have a great day, and we'll check you out on the next show.